My name is Georgia. My name is Georgia Roloff with the League of Women Voters of Lincoln County. We are really pleased today to have as our guest Dr. Lisa Balance, who is from the, I have to look at my notes because I'm one of those people who really needs to learn today, from the OSU Marine Mammal Institute. And many of you may know that they do things with whales, but they do so much more than that, that I will not bother to say any more and just let Lisa introduce herself to us. Welcome, Lisa. We're so glad to have you with us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Georgia. And I really do so appreciate this invitation. I would like to share my screen. And I believe I need someone to allow me to do that.
You now have co-host ability.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to check to make sure that everyone can see my title slide. Yes, excellent. All right. Once again, my name is Lisa Balance, and I am very privileged to be the director of Oregon State University's Marine Mammal Institute. I'm also professor in the Department of Fisheries, Wildlife, and Conservation Sciences here at OSU. And again, I'm just so thrilled to receive this invitation to talk with you all about what I do and what we do here at the Institute. I was trying to think about what I should focus on, and because this is my first encounter with the Lincoln County League of Women Voters, I decided that I would give you all just a brief overview of the entire Institute, and then hope that your appetites will be whetted, and you might invite me back for a more focused presentation on one or more of the topics that I'll touch on today. So I'm going to begin at the beginning with a history of Oregon State University's Marine Mammal Institute. And that history dates all the way back to 1973 with a young fellow at the time by the name of Bruce Mate. Dr. Bruce Mate was hired as an assistant professor into the College of Earth and Ocean Sciences, as it was known back then, in 1973. He was fresh out of his doctorate degree at the University of Oregon, but fortunately OSU received him professionally. Bruce was very interested in learning about the movements of individual animals, and he was a pioneer in the field of animal-borne tag research. That is specifically placing tags onto animals to see where they go. And he started this research with seals because seals come out on land and they are much easier to access. You can capture them and carefully place tags on seals. So he started that research in 1975, but quickly became enamored with whales and figured out how to place a tag on a whale, initially beginning in 1979. Those were radio tags, but 10 years later, he placed the first satellite tag on a whale in 1989. And as you will see, he became known globally for his research on satellite tagging of whales. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. Let me continue with my history of the Marine Mammal Institute. A big milestone came in 2006 when the Institute itself was created. Prior to that, it was simply a single laboratory, Bruce's laboratory, and was referred to as the Marine Mammal Program. But in 2006, Bruce moved forward to create the Marine Mammal Institute, and he began to hire additional professors into the Institute. Fast forward to the year 2019, Bruce decided to retire, although we continue to have him as an emeritus professor, and he continues to work with us at halftime. He and I have a very close relationship and have weekly meetings to this day. In 2019, that was when I first began my position here as the new only second director of the Marine Mammal Institute. And I've been very thrilled to be here ever since. So just a quick overview of myself and my own background. I actually came here mid to late career after a full 30-year career with NOAA. NOAA is National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and NOAA's claim to fame, it's a part of the federal government, is predicting the weather, specifically hurricanes. But NOAA does a lot more than that. There's a NOAA Fisheries office that oversees health of the oceans in the context of sustainable use by humans. So it has a heavy focus on fisheries. And because fisheries impact marine mammals, it also has a fairly heavy focus on marine mammals. So I was with NOAA professionally for 30 years at one of the 6 science centers around the country. That was the Southwest Fisheries Science Center in San Diego, California, where for the last 15 of those 30 years, I was the director of the Marine Mammal and Turtle Research Division, overseeing about 70 scientists with a budget of about $9 million annually. Very exciting, fulfilling career. Among my most significant, I guess, responsibilities while I was there is I was the chief scientist of NOAA's Eastern Tropical Pacific Dolphin Research Program. Most or all of you probably don't know what that is, but I suspect that most of you do know what dolphin safe tuna is. It's tuna cans in supermarkets around the country and around the world that bear that label, dolphin safe. And that means that the tuna were caught in ways that do not harm dolphins. There is a huge amount of science, decades of science associated with creating that label and understanding what it means. And I was privileged to be the chief scientist of that program for about 10 years. Another little thing about me is that I'm also a seabird ecologist. In fact, I got my PhD in seabird ecology, studying communities of seabirds in the oceanic Eastern Tropical Pacific. That PhD came from UCLA. Prior to that, I got my master's degree in behavioral ecology of dolphins from Moss Landing Marine Lab. And my bachelor's degree came from University of California, San Diego. So I am a product of the California educational system, and actually came from northern New Mexico, where I was born and lived until I graduated from high school. So back to the Marine Mammal Institute. We have as our mission integration of research, graduate education, and outreach to advance our knowledge of marine mammals, to train the next generation of professionals, and to engage with stakeholders in order to ensure that these animals and their ecosystems are always healthy. So we put a lot of thought into that mission statement, and we mean every bit of what that mission statement says. Our principles and goals include scientific rigor, conducting basic research with strong links to applied science, where applied science is really using our research to solve real world problems. And you'll hear more about that in a few minutes. We changed the course of lives for Oregon State University students at all levels and in all fields. We contribute to communities from local right here in Newport to international and everywhere in between. And finally, we conduct our research and activities at a global scale and with global impact. So without a doubt, the Marine Mammal Institute is a center of excellence for marine mammal science. And I spoke earlier about our early science legacy, and indeed it is a lasting science legacy pertaining to whale-borne satellite tags. And I'm going to run an animation for you. Before I do that, let me orient you to this map on the right side of the screen. You can see Alaska, the Aleutian chain up here at the top, running the west coast of North America, Canada, on down through the west coast of the United States, into Mexico, the Baja California Peninsula and the mainland Mexico. And then here's Hawaii, down in the tropics here and at the lower left-hand side of our screen. And what I'm going to show you are a series of individual humpback whales that have been fitted with satellite tags. And you'll see a series of colored lines. And those colored lines start where the whale was first tagged. And then you can see the tracks of those individual whales as they move all the way across the eastern North Pacific. And it's a tremendous amount of distance that they are covering. I'll draw your attention to the upper time scale that shows you the year, the month, and the day. That will give you an idea of how much time this represents. And the colors of these lines represent different populations of these humpback whales. So what you can see is that there are a lot of different populations of humpback whales as identified genetically. I won't go into that here. And you can see that these whales definitely travel huge ocean basin distances. That data set and that legacy of satellite tracking technology was inherited by Dr. Daniel Palacios, who is a tenure-track professor with us now. He actually worked in Bruce's lab and got his PhD under Bruce, so it's appropriate that that legacy was transferred to Dr. Palacios. He has started his own lab, the Whale Habitat and Ecology and Telemetry Lab, and that uses satellite tracking technology and the legacy data set that Bruce created to understand movement and migration patterns, identify critical habitat for whales, and learn more about exposure to anthropogenic risks. And the Institute, as I indicated earlier, we do a lot more. So about 15 years ago, Dr. Scott Baker was hired. He created the Cetacean Conservation and Genomics Lab, which uses molecular genetics on dolphins to whales and everything in between to reconstruct the past, to understand the present, and to conserve the future. And those colored lines that I showed you in the slide of the animation of the humpback whale movements, those were data that came from Scott's molecular genetics lab. About 7 years ago, Dr. Lee Torres was hired into the Institute. She created the GEM Lab, Geospatial Ecology of Marine Megafauna Lab, and she and her graduate students and postdocs study ecology, health, and distribution of whales with a focus on mitigating space use conflicts with human activities. We also have had as a member of our institute, Jim Rice, for about 15 years, and he leads the Oregon Marine Mammal Stranding Network. Jim's focus is scientific investigation of marine mammal strandings and welfare of stranded live marine mammals. And I'm really thrilled to announce that just this past fall, we brought on a new tenure track professor, Dr. Mauricio Cantor. He studies behavioral ecology of whales, dolphins, and porpoises from individuals to behavior of communities and behavior of ecosystems. And just a couple of weeks ago, we brought on our most recent tenure track professor, Dr. Kate Stafford, who studies acoustics passively by listening to the ocean and with a focus on whales and polar ecosystems. In addition to these tenured and tenure track professors, we have a host of other principal investigators that are affiliated with the Marine Mammal Institute. They all have a focus on marine mammals, and they all have a variety of disciplinary areas of expertise. So in total, our institute is 6 tenured or tenure track professors and labs. It also includes the coordinator of the Oregon Marine Mammal Stranding Network and 8 additional principal investigators. We are growing, and it's a very exciting place to be right now. So what I want to do now in the next few slides is just give you a few snippets of the type of science we do and the impact that that science has. And the theme of all of this, again, to whet your appetites, is cool science. Without a doubt, we do cool science, just science that makes you amazed that such things are possible and such things are out there in the ocean and such things are true. And I'll start with this one. We are partnering with the US Coast Guard, who is out there scanning our waters to keep humans that are on the water safe, as you all know. But we piggyback, they allow us to piggyback on their aerial Coast Guard helicopter surveys so that we can conduct our own surveys on whale and dolphin abundance and distribution in Oregon waters. And here I'm going to roll this animation which shows Craig Hayslip leaning out the open door of one of these helicopters and photographing a fin whale, in this case, as it blows at the surface and comes to the surface of the water. Those are Dall's porpoise that are riding the bow wave of that wave as it comes to the surface. So cool science, really fun to do, really amazing stuff. But I told you I would also highlight the impact, and there are real world impacts from the data that we're able to collect from these helicopter surveys. An example is that whale entanglement in fishing gear is a problem. And it's a problem here on the West Coast, here in Oregon waters, and it's a global problem. And these data on distribution and abundance allow us to assess overlap in space and time between whales and fishing hotspots to actively minimize negative impacts on whales and on fisheries, because actually no fishery wants to entangle whales in their fishing gear. Here's another example of our cool science that comes from Scott's molecular genetics lab. Scott is a leader in what we refer to as eDNA, environmental DNA. In fact, seawater contains DNA from the animals that live there, and that includes dolphins and whales. And we have developed a reference library of DNA sequences that allow us to identify even the world's rarest whale. I won't go through the panel on the right that shows the various stages that we have to go through, from collecting a couple of liters of water to filtering that water and finally running the DNA. But the impact of this really cool technological tool is that this environmental DNA offers a powerful new approach to assess marine biodiversity and to better understand distribution, particularly of rare species, just by collecting a jar of water. Here's my third example of some of the cool science that we do. Again, taking advantage of technology, this time using drones and underwater GoPro cameras to provide new perspectives on gray whale feeding behavior and shape, which is a proxy for health. And I'm going to run this film, which shows a drone's eye view of a gray whale at the surface. And this is right offshore here of Newport, where we study them every summer. And then taking you underwater now You can see that murky water that's right offshore here, relatively shallow water, and there's a gray whale. And gray whales are known to feed on the bottom here, as well as in the water column itself. Taking you back up to a drone's eye view, here you will see a gray whale coming to the surface in a few moments. There it is. And we can take a snapshot of that gray whale and measure it quite precisely so that we can determine not only the length, but most importantly, the width of the gray whale. Here's a gray whale underneath the water, and in the water column, you can see some of those small invertebrates on which those whales are feeding. So what we're doing is taking these photographs of these whales at the surface to measure their fatness, which is a measure of health, and to collect their prey samples and see what they're eating and how much. The impact of this is that we can also link these data with ocean noise and vessel traffic to allow us to understand the impacts of these stressors on the distinct population of gray whales that lives right here off the Oregon coast. Here's my last example of cool science that we do. And this is research that we did just this past September, where we encountered an extraordinary pair of 2 cryptic beaked whales right here in Oregon waters. And I'm going to run this animation and talk you through it. First, you'll notice that there is an animal there in the distance, but what you'll also notice is the water is not calm. We were 200 miles off the mouth of the Columbia River when we encountered this pair of beaked whales. It was blowing about 25 knots there. And although the swells don't look that big, it was about 9-foot swell. So it was fairly rough out there. Although it was pretty extraordinary for us, you all might take a look at these images, at this film of these 2 whales coming to the surface and think, well, that's actually pretty boring. What's so extraordinary about that? Let me tell you briefly about beaked whales themselves. It's a family of whales that are very poorly known. They're very poorly known because they're found in oceanic waters and they are deep divers, 1.5 hours at a time. So even when you see them, it's difficult to get a good look. And to make matters even more complicated, you can only identify adult males to species. They're bizarre animals. The adult males have 2 erupted teeth. These are the teeth of this dense beaked whale. But if you see a female or young, you can't identify them to species. Some of these can be extremely bizarre, like this strap-toothed beaked whale where the male 2 teeth wrap entirely over the upper jaw. But as a result of them being so shy of ships and so oceanic and such deep divers, there are 6 species that are known only from dead animals stranded on the beach. 6 species that have never been seen alive in the wild. Now, let me take you back to this video here and tell you that when we made this sighting of these 2 animals 200 miles offshore, we got some pretty good looks. In fact, some of the animals, a couple of them got within 10 meters of the ship. And coming up soon, you'll see an animal surface, and we got a very good look at it, very extraordinary photographs. And as you can see, also video. This is some of the video slowed down. And if you watch carefully, you'll see this animal come up to the surface. And yes, we got a great look at its head and its teeth, which is what you want. That over there in the lower left-hand corner is the bow of the ship. That's how close we were to those animals. Nevertheless, as I told you, you need to have adult males to identify the animals to species. Here's one coming up, and watch, it's going to flinch its tail right there. And that was in response to a biopsy dart that hit the back of the animal. Here we are picking that biopsy dart up. It takes a pencil eraser sized piece of skin from the whale, And these whales were subadult animals. So we had no idea what species they are. But fortunately, we were able to get this biopsy sample. We brought it back to our molecular genetics lab, and Scott's lab told us what it was. It was Hubb's beaked whale, which has been seen alive in the wild only once before since its description in 1955. And it was right here off the coast of Oregon, albeit 200 miles off the Columbia River mouth. The significance of this was huge with global impact. And that is because we were able to link the species identity through that genetic biopsy sample with the looks of the animal, the great visual sighting that we had, and most importantly, we were recording their calls. So we now know what this animal sounds like when it calls, and that call has been recorded throughout the North Pacific. So we know what those calls are now. It instantly allows us to understand a lot more about the distribution, relative abundance, status of that animal, and vulnerability to threats. So I'm going to move on and go back to the Institute as a whole and talk briefly about our growing and thriving graduate student and postdoctoral community. Graduate students and postdocs are the heart and soul of research because they're not afraid to ask new questions that those of us that are further along in our career might think are foolish questions. Students push you to revisit old paradigms and learn new things. We right now have 9 master's students, 7 doctorate students, and 6 postdoctorates. And we've brought in 8 new students just this past fall alone, doubling our current community of graduate students. So it's an exciting time for us in terms of our student population. We are the only entity of its kind that I'm aware of that has our very own research vessel, the Pacific Storm. She was donated to us by a commercial fishing family, and we refitted her to be a research vessel. She's got, she can go to sea for 30 days. She's been to the Bering Sea, she's been to the Costa Rica Dome and everywhere in between. And she was the vessel that took us offshore of Oregon for that extraordinary and significant beaked whale encounter. She just finished a very full season this past summer and fall and is headed up to the shipyard in Toledo, where we'll have some repair and maintenance work done before she goes back out to sea next spring and summer. A huge and invaluable asset for us. And we also have a fleet of small boats when we work locally here off the coast. We found that rigid-hulled inflatable boats are best when working around whales and dolphins because they're highly maneuverable, they're forgiving in rough seas. We refer to these rigid-hulled inflatable boats as ribs. My 3 favorites are prime rib, spare rib, and barbecue rib. And we have the new Gladys Valley Marine Studies building. And those of you who have been in Newport and along the coast in the area for more than a year or so probably are aware of the plans and the preparation and the building of this new facility. It is complete now and it is open to the public, and I'm sitting in it right now. It's, first of all, an incredibly impressive feat of engineering. And those of you who have been here for some time undoubtedly are aware of the pretty significant controversy that went back and forth when this building was first proposed to go forward, because we at Hatfield are sitting below the blue line in the tsunami inundation zone. But this building has been constructed to withstand a tsunami that would be generated by a magnitude 9 earthquake, and not only withstand that, but to provide a safe haven for almost 1,000 people here at Hatfield and the public surrounding Hatfield. That's what that big ramp is. It's designed to allow people to access the roof of the building where enough food, water, and shelter are stored to keep us all warm and healthy for days after such a tsunami should it occur. So an impressive feat of engineering itself. It also has a very futuristic design and futuristic technologies to advance our research and the thinking and interaction that is necessary for that cutting edge research. We have a dedicated innovation laboratory, a 2-story laboratory that has a sole purpose of just being a place where people can come and create new technologies. And most exciting for me, all of the Marine Mammal Institute is located on the 3rd floor of this building, with the exception of Scott's Molecular Genetics Lab, which is on the 2nd floor. Prior to this building, the Marine Mammal Institute professors and students and postdocs were scattered all across the Hatfield campus. This is the first consolidation of our institute's people since we became an institute. And it represents an unparalleled opportunity for new synergies within our institute and external to that. And even under COVID constraints, we are now back in our offices and working, and it's a very exciting place to be, this 3rd floor. So I'm going to close with this slide, and this slide is prompting me to mention one more asset that we have, and that is frankly our most important and most significant asset, and that is our broad and deep donor base. Bruce, for 40 years, has been reaching out and interacting with the community here in Newport, all across Oregon and the coast and internal, and across the United States and in other countries, to engage non-scientists with our research. And that has built a broad and deep donor base. And these donors have engaged with the Institute to make a great deal possible for us. Those donor contributions and gifts range from large to small. Every single one of them have been significant. We now have 4 graduate student fellowships that support doctorate students. We have 2 this year, ARCS scholarships that provide additional support to doctorate students. We conduct an annual Baja gray whale expedition, and all of our guests provide donations to the Institute. I mentioned the Pacific Storm, our research vessel, which was gifted to us by a commercial fishing family. And finally, I want to touch on the Oregon gray whale license plates, which I hope you've seen around the state. The $35 from each plate that we collect comes right here to our Institute, and it is making some incredible science and support of graduate students possible. So I know that some of you out on this very meeting are members of our donor base. And so I just want to close by really deeply thanking you and the significant donors that have made all of this possible. Thanks again for the invitation to speak to you. And I look forward to the next time, hopefully in person.
Well, thank you very much. Can you unshare the screen?